Dr. Ella Chen had always been a bit of an oddball. Her lab, a chaotic symphony of colorful beakers, half-finished gadgets, and stacks of scientific journals, was a testament to her brilliance and eccentricity. Today, however, was special. Today, she was about to revolutionize the concept of time travel, or so she believed. Ella stood in front of her gleaming new invention, the Temporal Avatar 3000, a contraption that looked suspiciously like a high-tech recliner upholstered in bright yellow fabric. Above it hung a neon sign that read, "Time Travel, now with 50% less reality." She adjusted her glasses, which were perpetually slipping down her nose, and gave herself an encouraging nod. "Let's do this," she muttered after a few last-minute adjustments, mostly involving duct tape. Ella settled into the chair. Her heart raced as she activated the machine. A series of flashing lights and beeping noises surrounded her, reminiscent of a malfunctioning microwave. She closed her eyes, ready to embark on her first journey through time, but instead of landing in the distant past, she found herself in a crowd at a time travel convention in 2080, surrounded by fans who thought she was the keynote speaker. The hall was packed with people in futuristic clothing, their faces lit by the glow of various gadgets. They chattered excitedly about the latest advancements in time travel, but Ella was still trying to wrap her head around the fact that she'd accidentally jumped into a future she hadn't intended to visit. As a fan approached her, gushing about her brilliant theories, and how she was a pioneer, Ella felt a wave of panic. She had to say something intelligent, thank you. You know, time travel is like, a really complicated microwave. You press buttons, and sometimes you end up with a hot mess, she exclaimed, her cheeks turning as red as the neon sign above her. Laughter erupted from the audience, and Ella could only marvel at the absurdity of her situation. After what felt like an eternity of answering questions she wasn't prepared for, Ella managed to escape to a quiet corner. Her friend Max, a laid-back techie who often acted as her sounding board, found her, chuckling. "You're a hit, document. The future loves your microwave theory." "It was a disaster," she groaned. "I meant to save history, not become its punchline." Max grinned. "Well, you did say you wanted to be remembered. So, what's next?" Determined to reclaim her narrative, Ella revealed her grand plan. "I'm going to use the avatar technology to go back and change a pivotal moment in history. If I can just tweak a few things, I can make a difference." "Sounds risky," Max warned, raising an eyebrow. "You know what they say about time travel, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, like a very confused Newton." "Nonsense," she declared. "This is science. What could go wrong?" With her resolve set, Ella dove into her research. After much deliberation, she settled on a historical figure she admired, a scientist whose groundbreaking work had been overlooked. Armed with excitement, she calibrated the Temporal Avatar 3000 for her first real jump, determined to set things right. In a flash of light, Ella found herself in the 1960s, standing in a sun-drenched laboratory filled with clunky machinery and posters of iconic scientists. She adjusted her retro glasses and prepared to take action. The plan was simple: inspire her idol before he made a crucial misstep that would derail his career. But as soon as she stepped into her avatar's skin, things started to unravel. Ella approached her idol, a charismatic man named Dr. Henry Wexler, and in a burst of enthusiasm, accidentally knocked over a beaker filled with colorful liquid. "Oops. Sorry," she squeaked. The mishap sent the contents splattering everywhere, including all over Dr. Wexler, who was now splattered with what looked suspiciously like glowing slime. "Who are you?" he asked, eyebrows raised, his expression somewhere between amusement and bewilderment. "I'm, your biggest fan. I've traveled through time to tell you, you need to stick to your research and not get distracted by, rock music," she blurted out, hoping he'd catch on. To her shock, instead of taking her seriously, he laughed heartily. "Rock music? That sounds intriguing. What's a Beatles?" Ella groaned inwardly as she watched Dr. Wexler's attention shift from scientific inquiry to musical experimentation. Over the next few weeks, Ella inadvertently inspired him to start a band, which, thanks to her enthusiastic encouragement and a fortuitous meeting with some local musicians, became a sensation. When she finally returned to her own time, she couldn't wait to see the results of her intervention. However, her excitement quickly turned to dismay when she discovered that Dr. Wexler was now a legendary rock star, his scientific achievements overshadowed by the fame of his hit song, Waves of Time. Instead of history celebrating his research, it was filled with nostalgic tales of his days as a rock icon, complete with fan conventions dedicated to his music. "Ella, this is brilliant," Max said, chuckling as he pointed at a poster featuring a bespectacled Wexler playing a guitar. "You've changed the course of history." "Changed? More like ruined," Ella groaned, clutching her head. "What do I do now? I'm a mere footnote in a biography about music." Max shrugged. "Looks like it's time for another jump, my friend. Fix this mess." With a mix of determination and dread, Ella decided to try again. Each attempt to set things right led to increasingly ridiculous outcomes. In the 1800s, she accidentally invented a wildly impractical gadget intended to help with sewing but instead became a fashionable accessory. Think Victorian-era fanny packs. In her next jump to the Renaissance, she bungled a plan to inspire an artist, only to find herself embroiled in a failed art heist that involved her wearing a giant mustache as a disguise. After a series of ridiculous misadventures, Ella realized she had to step back and reassess. Maybe trying to change history was not the answer, perhaps understanding it was. During her latest jump, while sitting in a bustling cafe in the Renaissance, she watched the vibrant interactions between artists and thinkers. The moment was beautiful, chaotic, and utterly human. Finally, she returned to her own time, exhausted but enlightened. Ella sat down with Max, who was now knee-deep in research for a podcast titled Time Bloopers, featuring her disastrous attempts at time travel. "I think I'm done trying to change history," she said, a smile creeping onto her face. "I think I need to embrace my quirks and celebrate the past instead of trying to rewrite it." Max nodded, impressed. "So what's the plan? You gonna become a historian or something?" "Not quite," she replied. "I'm going to create something new. I'll use what I learned to inspire others through my science, not through meddling. And maybe we can even start that podcast together." And so, Ella began a new chapter. With her newfound perspective, she decided to celebrate the imperfect, quirky history of science and its eccentric heroes. Her work gained recognition, and she became an unlikely celebrity in her own right, sharing the hilarious and absurd stories from her time travel escapades. As she stood in front of a crowd at a science convention, Ella embraced her quirks and recounted her misadventures, eliciting laughter and inspiration. "So remember," she said with a twinkle in her eye, "sometimes it's not about changing history, but rather about finding joy in the messiness of it all." With that, the audience erupted into applause, and Ella felt a rush of fulfillment. She had finally found her place, not as a perfect scientist, but as a relatable, human one, ready to embrace every beautiful mistake along the way. And thus, Ella Chen became not just a traveler of time, but a pioneer of stories, inspiring generations to come, proving that sometimes the best way to understand the past is simply to laugh at it. Ella Chen's newfound fame as a quirky time-traveling scientist blossomed in unexpected ways. Her podcast, Time Bloopers, became a sensation, resonating with listeners who found solace in her humorous tales of misadventures across time. Each episode was a blend of laugh-out-loud stories and heartfelt lessons, often peppered with her signature catchphrase, "Embrace the mess." As the weeks turned into months, Ella found herself speaking at universities, science fairs, and even a few comedy clubs. People were drawn to her infectious enthusiasm and her ability to weave science with a touch of absurdity. Her once chaotic lab transformed into a creative hub where she collaborated with other scientists, artists, and even comedians, blending their talents to foster a new wave of interest in science and history. One day, while preparing for a particularly exciting live podcast recording, Ella received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "A unique opportunity." Intrigued, she opened it to find an invitation from a prestigious science foundation to present her ideas at an international conference on innovation and ethics in science. Her heart raced as she read through the details. This was an opportunity to discuss not just her time travel mishaps but the ethical implications of manipulating history. "Max, you've got to see this," she called out to her friend, who was busy assembling a makeshift sound booth out of cardboard boxes. "What's up?" he replied, peeking over the top. "I just got invited to an international conference. I can talk about my experiences and the importance of ethics in scientific exploration." Max grinned widely. "That's amazing. You've come a long way from that awkward keynote at the convention." Ella laughed, recalling her disastrous first foray into public speaking. "Right? I can't believe I survived that." With a few weeks to prepare, Ella dove into her research. She wanted to emphasize the balance between scientific ambition and ethical responsibility. As she crafted her presentation, she decided to include not just her own experiences, but also stories from history where ambition led to unintended consequences, stories that mirrored her own time-traveling escapades. The day of the conference arrived, and Ella stood backstage, pacing nervously. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation as scientists, ethicists, and innovators filled the seats. When her name was announced, she took a deep breath and stepped into the spotlight. "Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Ella Chen, and today I'm going to take you on a journey, without a time machine." The audience chuckled, and she felt the tension in her shoulders ease. She began recounting her most outrageous time travel stories, embellishing the details for comedic effect. As she spoke about her disastrous attempts to change history, she wove in reflections on the lessons learned, emphasizing the unpredictability of human actions and the importance of ethical considerations in scientific pursuits. The audience roared with laughter at her blunders, but the deeper messages resonated just as strongly. As she reached the conclusion, Ella felt a surge of confidence. So, while time travel may not be on our immediate horizon, the lessons we learn from our past, whether through our successes or mistakes, are invaluable. Let's not be afraid to embrace the chaos, learn from it, and create a better future. The applause was thunderous. Ella stepped off the stage, her heart racing, a mix of exhilaration and relief washing over her. She had done it. She had transformed her misadventures into a meaningful conversation about ethics in science. After the presentation, she was approached by several attendees, each eager to discuss her ideas. Among them was Dr. Laura Thompson, a leading expert in ethics and innovation, who expressed her admiration for Ella's unique perspective. "You have a gift for storytelling, Ella. Your ability to connect history with science is refreshing." We need more voices like yours in the field." The two women hit it off immediately, engaging in a lively discussion about the intersection of science and ethics. They exchanged contact information, and Dr. Thompson invited Ella to collaborate on a project focused on ethical considerations in emerging technologies. Over the following months, Ella and Dr. Thompson worked together to develop a series of workshops aimed at educating young scientists about the ethical implications of their work. They traveled to schools and universities, using Ella's humorous anecdotes to spark discussions about responsibility and the impact of scientific advancements on society. As their partnership flourished, Ella found herself not only growing as a scientist but also as a mentor. She relished the opportunity to inspire the next generation of innovators, guiding them to consider the broader implications of their discoveries. She often used her own experiences, both successes and blunders, to illustrate her points, emphasizing that mistakes were not failures but valuable learning opportunities. One day, while hosting a workshop at a local high school, Ella noticed a student in the back who seemed disengaged. After her presentation, she approached him. "Hey there, I noticed you didn't seem too into it. Is everything all right?" He shrugged, looking down. "I just don't think science is for me. I'm not like you." "Not like me?" Ella echoed, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "You're a time traveler, and I can barely pass my chemistry class," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ella knelt down to his level, her expression warm and encouraging. "You know, every great scientist has had their share of struggles. My first time traveling attempt? Let's just say I ended up with glowing slime all over my favorite sweater. It was a disaster." His eyes widened in disbelief. "Really?" "Absolutely. But I learned from it. Science is all about trying new things, making mistakes, and having fun along the way. It's not about being perfect, it's about being curious and open to learning." The boy considered her words, a spark of interest flickering in his eyes. "Maybe I could try to look at it that way." "Definitely. And who knows? Maybe you'll discover something amazing, or at least have a good story to tell." As she walked away, Ella felt a surge of purpose. This was what she had been meant to do: connect with people, share her experiences, and inspire them to embrace their own journeys. She couldn't change the past, but she could help shape the future. As her influence grew, Ella began to receive invitations to larger conferences and events. Her podcast continued to thrive, and she was often invited as a guest on others, sharing her tales of time travel and the lessons they taught her. She found herself in high demand, her unique blend of science and storytelling appealing to a broad audience. One evening, after a particularly successful event, Ella returned to her lab, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The clutter that had once felt overwhelming now inspired her. Each quirky gadget and colorful beaker told a story of her journey. From awkward scientist to sought-after speaker, she settled into her chair, gazing at her beloved temporal avatar 3000, which stood as a reminder of her adventurous spirit. Ella chuckled softly, thinking back to her initial missteps and the chaos that ensued. "What's next for you, buddy?" she mused. The machine sat quietly, almost as if it were pondering the question itself. Perhaps, she thought, there was still more to explore, not just in time, but in the connections she was forging with others. A sudden idea struck her. What if she organized a live time travel experiment? Not one where history could be changed, but where she could invite a group of young scientists to join her for a day of exploration, using the temporal avatar to experience history in a controlled and educational way. They could step into avatars of historical figures, learn about their contributions, and come away with a greater appreciation for the past without altering a thing. The concept filled her with excitement. Ella began brainstorming ways to make it happen, drawing up plans and drafting proposals. With Max's help, they set to work on logistics, reaching out to schools, universities, and potential sponsors. Months later, the day of the event arrived. Ella stood before a group of eager participants, her heart racing with anticipation. Welcome to our first live time travel experience. Today, we're going to step into the shoes of some of history's greatest minds. But remember, we're here to learn, not to change anything. As they began the experiment, laughter and enthusiasm filled the room. Participants donned their avatars and entered different historical settings. Some became scientists, others artists, all exploring the challenges and triumphs their historical counterparts faced. The atmosphere was electric, and Ella watched with joy as curiosity sparked in the eyes of the young scientists. After the experience, they gathered to share their insights. The students spoke passionately about what they had learned, how history was not just a series of events but a tapestry of human experiences. Ella beamed with pride, realizing that this was exactly what she had hoped for. As the day wound down, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Ella had created something meaningful, a bridge between the past and the future, and a way for young minds to connect with history in a fun, engaging manner. Later that evening, as she sat in her lab reflecting on the day, she received a message from Dr. Thompson. "I heard about your event. Brilliant work. Let's talk soon about expanding this program nationally." Ella's heart swelled with excitement. The possibilities were endless. She was no longer just a time traveler but a catalyst for change, a storyteller weaving connections through the fabric of history and science. And in that moment, she realized that while she might never travel through time in the traditional sense, she was, in many ways, shaping the future. She was building a legacy, one filled with laughter, lessons, and the invaluable notion that mistakes are just stepping stones to greater understanding. As she prepared for bed, Ella took one last look at her lab, a smile playing on her lips. The journey had been unpredictable and wild, filled with glowing slime and Victorian fanny packs, but it had led her exactly where she needed to be. She felt a warmth in her heart, knowing she was making a difference, one story at a time. And with that thought, she closed her eyes, dreaming not of the past but of the future she was helping to create. Ella Chen, the time traveler without a time machine, had embraced the chaos of life, and she was ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. The end.